we could talk about how much training we get per year and is it enough? And I think all of us would say, no, of course it's not, right? So, but let's look at any other profession outside of law enforcement: medicine, finance, risk management, law. If you want to get ahead and you want to be the best, you need to go out and seek out mechanisms that are going to make you better in that career field.
I said either I can be this miserable, grumpy, mustard stain on my shirt police officer and not care, or maybe I could be the one that does care and, keep positive and keep moving on. And so I kind of made that decision, I'm going to stay on the positive end of this. So good morning and welcome to the Man of the Law podcast. I'm here today with Joe SCARGILL, and just a brief introduction on myself that people don't know who I am. I train at BJJ Chicago. I'm a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a brown belt under Andre Terencio and Hanet Stack. We have two locations here in Chicago, one in Chicago, 2643 West Chicago. The other one is in Arlington Heights. So I started my jiu-jitsu journey because I started in corrections. I did 4 years in corrections and knew I needed to do some supplemental training, which I did. I found Andre and Hanet, two fantastic people, two great instructors. Been with them the whole time. I was probably 2011, 2012, I started with them, and just it kind of coincides with my law enforcement career when I started there. So I've been, in law enforcement about 13 years now, and 9 years on patrol in Chicago. I'm still working the streets of Chicago. I still work the South Side. I'm a patrolman and work the wagon a lot on the South Side of Chicago. I still enjoy what I do. I still enjoy the people I work with, and I'm still trying to promote Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, fundamental Jiu-Jitsu, and some of these law enforcement programs that are out there too, specifically for law enforcement combatives and things like that. To police officers, just so we can get better at what we do on a daily basis, and, grappling and with individuals and taking individuals into custody is, not as easy as it seems. And, the more training you have and, the better equipped you can be, for your next street encounter. And that's really what it is. And it keeps, yourself safe, the subject safe, and it's, better for everybody all around. So to introduce Mr. SCARGILL here, he is United States Secret Service agent for over 24 years. You are the head of the Jacksonville field office right now. Currently serving as a special agent in charge of the Jacksonville field office. Joe leads all of the protective, investigative, and intelligence operations in North Florida, which is a big job. And you've had quite a career in the Secret Service. You've done a lot of travel. I know that. We're going to talk about that. You've been, overseas, and you had quite a career in the Secret Service. And it's great to have you on the show, and great to talk to you. And thank you for being here, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. Really appreciate it, man. I'm excited.
Yeah. So I've been training since 2011, 2012, just around that area. I started because I got into law enforcement. I got into corrections and said, I need to do some supplemental training. The guys I worked with were like, do you know how to fight? And I thought I really did, and really had no concept of fighting and no idea what I was doing. And so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when I started, I was like, man, I need to be training this and continue to train this. And so with your start, I think early 2000s, and Jiu-Jitsu was kind of, new in the country then too. It wasn't as big as it is now. So was getting the job as a Secret Service agent, directly related to your start in Jiu-Jitsu?
No, so I wasn't really exposed to jiu-jitsu formally until after I was on the job as an agent. So I had a wrestling and a traditional martial arts background. Did a little wrestling through high school and college, and then when I got hired in 2000 by the Secret Service, I started in Columbus, Ohio. So I was with the police department, but before the Secret Service for a short time. And kind of the life cycle of a Secret Service agent. You start field and you go to Washington, D.C. for your protection assignment, and then that would be what we would consider like your phase 2, and then your phase 3 career would be back to the field office. So that's the basic cycle of life for a typical Secret Service agent. So mine was a little different, as you saw from my background. I've moved around quite a bit. I'm currently on my 7th assignment with the Secret Service. So I spent my first few years in Columbus, and I got transferred to our training academy as an instructor. So I was selected to go there and teach, and I got put into our control tactics section. Everybody else calls defensive tactics. We call it control tactics. Don't know why. So it was there that I was really first exposed formally to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we had a Secret Service officer. We have two main badge and gun carrying mechanisms, right? The special agent side, which is what I do. And then we have a uniformed division side, which is, uniformed officers, based in the National Capital Region around the White House and things like that. So he was an officer, but he was a Helsing Gracie black belt, in 2004. So, and kind of like an OG, right? He grew up in Hawaii, I believe, and met Helsing out there and had gone through the belts. So he would host, kind of like a fight club at the academy, and people from all different sections, not just control tactics, would come and learn jiu-jitsu from Scott Devine. He's still teaching. He's at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia now, and he has affiliates in the Southeast. But that was my first exposure to it. And, just with the wrestling background and seeing how effective it was with some of the law enforcement techniques, we started incorporating that into our control tactics program. So that was my first exposure to jiu-jitsu, and mostly no gi, almost exclusively no gi. But I wound up getting my blue belt from Scott.
Oh, awesome.
So while
for a black belt, in 2004 to be, teaching police officers and stuff, that was a big deal. Yeah.
On staff, right?
Not on just staff, coming in
and doing a seminar on staff. That was
that is a big deal.
That was cool.
Yeah.
That was cool. And our leadership at the time, had a background in more traditional martial arts, stand up,
sure,
karate, and but was open-minded to start incorporating some of this stuff, because let's face it, this, and probably most of the listeners do too, but the safest place I can put someone, whether I'm trying to arrest them, trying to control them, is on the ground with me on top in a dominant position, protecting myself and quite frankly, protecting them. Right. So it just makes sense. So I got my blue belt from Scott. Scott had moved on, went down to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, and then we established a relationship with Yamasaki Jiu-Jitsu. So Mario Yamasaki, he was a UFC referee for a long time. His brother, Fernando, did most of the instruction for us. So he would come to the academy sometimes. Sometimes we would go to his school and train. So I wound up getting my purple belt from Fernando Yamasaki. So this was 2007. I got my purple belt. And then still not much with the gi. I probably had a gi on less than half a dozen times at this point.
Oh, wow.
And honestly, the reason why, to be honest with you, John, was just kind of like cowardice, right? Because I could kind of punch above my weight in no gi with my wrestling background. I was a lot younger then, right? So I was still fast, I was still strong, I was still explosive. So I could give higher belts a really hard time, especially back then, right?
Yeah, especially with the wrestling background too. Yeah, absolutely.
I could give them in no gi. I could give them a really hard time. And I couldn't submit anyone, but I was hard to submit because, again, I was fast, I was explosive, I could hold guys down. I knew enough jiu-jitsu to stay out of, submissions, thanks to Scott and then again, training at Yamasaki's. But, I kind of, my ego got the better of me, and I just sort of refused to put the gi on because I knew it was going to, I was going to go from, I was a purple belt, but not to be cocky, just being honest, like I was giving brown and some blacks a hard time.
And you're like,
again, because of the wrestling and because at that point, jiu-jitsu hadn't evolved to what it is now. Right.
Right.
So I was just egotistical about it. And I didn't want to put the gi on because I knew now I was going to be, probably more like a blue belt level. Right. And I wasn't willing to do that.
Yeah, they're gonna slow down your game with the gi. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I wasn't willing to do that. And hindsight being 2020, I wish I would have. I would much, I'm black belt now, but I'd had several stripes on my belt if I would have done that. But again, it's about leaving your ego at the door, right? Every gym says that, and I just wasn't mature enough. I just wasn't mature enough to do it at that point.
Yeah.
So 2007, I get my purple belt, and then we have some offices overseas, and I'd always wanted to go overseas. Spent a little bit of time overseas in college, and I really enjoyed being over there. And so,
and you were still single at the time, right? You were still single, not married before you.
Well, I was married to my first wife at this point.
Oh, okay.
But I went over there. I was single by the time I got there.
Gotcha.
But but no kids. Okay. So I had put in to go to Italy several times, early in my career. Put in, rejected. Put in, rejected. We have a nice office in Rome, right? And so I put in, I believe it was the fourth time, and I was sitting at my desk in the basement of the Control Tactics building, or I might have been over in K9. So I had done some work on our special operations side and our tactical K9 program too. I had a background in dogs, and all of our instructors. Just a little sidebar: all of our instructors that were over there were civilian at the time. There was no. Just because our tactical program, again, early 2000s tactical dogs, were just kind of a thing, right? Using dogs to clear rooms, using dogs with a team. The Secret Service was kind of on the forefront of that. So we had, full-time straight tactical dogs. They were single-purpose dogs, strictly, for emergency response teams. And our instructors, a lot of them were military, and the Iraq war kicked back off again, so several of them got called back up.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so I had right. So now we've got this new program, we've got these dogs, and now we don't have enough people to train them. So I would go over on my lunch breaks and before and after my shifts and just be part of that at first to work with the dogs and kind of learn and get my toes back into that tactical world. And then, my section leadership made an agreement with their section leadership. So I was kind of doing double duty, both in the control tactics section and in the tactical K9 special operations section. It was an awesome experience, and probably the best law enforcement job you could ever have, right? Playing with dogs all day and doing jujitsu.
Yeah. And training. That's awesome.
And getting paid the same,
paid to do it. Yeah.
And it was like, kind of like a pinch me thing. Now I'd probably be in the hospital if I did that just for a couple days. But back then, you
could do it all day, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was great. But so I was in, really good shape, really getting a lot of exposure to use of force and what works and what doesn't. And got to go to some great schools while there. I went through Blackwater's high-risk warrant rescue school. I went to the early Gracie combatives program for law enforcement. We had several people come in and do instruction. We had Randy Couture come in and do a seminar for us. And I had known him from the wrestling community, but, we've actually developed into very close personal friends. I could talk about that, when the timeline comes. So 2007 hits, I'm a purple belt, and I wanted to go overseas. I put in to go to Rome several times, Rome. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call from a guy that kind of mentored me, and I knew him, through someone that really had mentored me. His name's Carl Agnelli. Carl's actually, I think he's a 4-star belt in northern New Jersey. So again, this jiu-jitsu connection. And then we all got our start in the Secret Service Academy. All of us got our jiu-jitsu start there with Scott. So this guy calls and says, "Hey, I know you want to go to Rome. That's not going to happen. What do you feel? How do you feel about Bulgaria?" And I was like, "Well, I don't even know where that is, right? So I didn't know if it was part of Russia, what the deal was, right?
Right.
But you
They'll
get
pull
these
out the
phone calls
map and start looking, right? Where is
yeah,
Bulgaria? Right. Yeah.
you know this, John. You
Yeah.
get these guys in these law enforcement agencies that are kind of kingmakers, and you can't
Yeah.
say no to them, right? You say
No.
no, and that
And you'll
phone
never
never
get a
rings
spot
again.
again. Absolutely. Yeah.
Never, right? And they're and I'm not saying this person was like that, right? But the culture. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go
You
to
take the opportunities you're given. Yeah.
yep.
Mhm.
And so I go to Bulgaria, and it was the best decision I made. Now there was no jiu-jitsu there at the time, at least that I know of,
Mm.
2007. But their combat sports culture is ingrained in that country
Mm.
back to hundreds and hundreds of years. So you talk about a combat sports culture in not only stand martial arts and Greco wrestling, freestyle wrestling, sambo, judo, and then now their jiu-jitsu is top notch. Some of the best jiu-jitsu in Europe is in Bulgaria, and
Mm.
so I go over there, and I had met a Bulgarian guy that worked at the embassy that was on one of these sambo judo teams. So I would go to this club with him, and we would practice. I'd show him a little jiu-jitsu. He'd show me some sambo judo, and it was just a great experience. And highly competitive guys, warrior spirit, all of them strong as hell. And one of the things over there, their law enforcement, everyone trains at a pretty high level, right? So I remember doing I think we were doing a tactical canine seminar, and part of the Bulgarian Tactical Officers Association, and I was given a presentation, and I was talking about dogs and how we wanted our working dogs not to have this survival fighting instinct, but more of a fighting spirit, and kind of like martial arts. I said, does anyone train martial arts? And one of the guys stood up and says, everyone in this room has been training since they were little kids in something.
Mm.
So they understand what you're saying is what he's saying, right? And I was like, man, you couldn't find that in America, right? I mean, I think
No.
if you were in a room full of cops, to say everybody's trained boxing, wrestling, sambo, judo, jiu-jitsu, krav maga, something their whole life, it would be rare, right? So that was like boom, light bulb moment. We need to change our mindset in America there.
Yeah.
And so I trained there for I was there for 5 years, learned a ton, and kind of started my own jiu-jitsu club. Met another young man over there that wanted to learn Brazilian jiu-jitsu, just had read about it on the internet, and so I trained with him, and now him and his brother are both black belts. They run a huge school in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Wow.
Really competitive. Yeah, huge kids program. Come back to the United States in 2012. Met my wife while I was over there in Bulgaria.
Mm-hmm.
For all the great work I did in Sofia, my reward was the Detroit, Michigan field office. So I had to do, I head to Detroit, and I've always been lucky to kind of find a gym, and found a gym there. It was called Kaizen Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's not there anymore. The owner, kind of retired and moved to Florida. But he was the first black belt in Michigan. He was a black belt under Higan Machado. So this was in 2012.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So again, really a great opportunity to learn some traditional martial arts. And, again, I've been very lucky. One of the big problems you always hear about people with jiu-jitsu is, it's expensive. It's expensive. I don't want to pay the tuition. And I've got a great counter to that. I always say, well, you shouldn't ask what it costs. You should ask what it's worth. Right.
Right.
And my credibility is a little questioned, though, because I've always been kind of able to trade some wrestling coaching or wrestling for jiu-jitsu. Because at this point I had a purple belt for 5 years, 6 years. So my wrestling for jiu-jitsu was pretty good. I would joke around and say, like, I had a black belt in anti-jiu-jitsu at that point. I could really prevent myself from getting submitted and kind of stay on top with most people. Now, obviously, some real high level guys, including Ryan, the black belt under Egan, would have no problem submitting me, right? But for most people, I would have a pretty good anti-jiu-jitsu game. But
Yeah.
I
And with
kind of
all your
noticed that
Sambo training in Bulgaria and all the training you did in Bulgaria, you were still training pretty intensely. It wasn't exactly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it was, still a highly, good form of, combative, sport.
yeah, and
Sambo and judo are fantastic. Yeah.
those leg lock attacks are an equalizer, and they really
Mhm.
at that time. Now it's really a hot thing here in America, but
Yeah.
at that time you could submit someone much better than you just because it wasn't part of the game. It was like getting in a knife fight and someone pulls out a gun, right? Whoa, these aren't the rules of engagement here. So
Yeah, there's no heel hooks, ankle locks. It was,
yeah, and people that did them, it was kind of like a
you were cheating.
like a
Yeah, it was
voodoo
like you
type.
were, you were
Yeah,
cheating. Like, hey, man,
like,
you're
yeah,
cheating
that's not,
here. Right.
kind of like what wrestlers thought about guard. Like, what is this? You're pinned, right? Like,
Right.
you should
Why
match
would you
is
be
over.
on your,
So
why would you be on your back? Why would you do that? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so and I'll speed this up so we can get to more of the law enforcement stuff. So
Yeah.
spent 3.5 years in Michigan, still nothing with the gi. Transferred down to Houston, Texas. Another jiu-jitsu gym there called Paradigm. Was able to again trade a little bit of wrestling training for jiu-jitsu, nothing with the gi. Then I go to Minnesota, and I got selected to be the agent in charge of the Minneapolis field office in 2017. So I get to Minnesota, same thing, find a gym, only train no gi, and then COVID hits. So now things change a little bit. So the black belt, who I eventually got my black belt from at the gym in Minnesota called the Cellar Gym. His name was Mauricio Cara, or I guess in Brazilian. 4-stripe checkmat black belt under Leo Vieira. Competition guy, just really a cool dude. And I had gotten into coaching wrestling when I got to Minnesota. So how that happened was my instructor in the police academy in the Columbus, Ohio, his name was Pat Slater. He was kind of my law enforcement mentor. Well, he had 2 sons that were, world-class wrestlers. They had both wrestled in Ohio, and then went to the University of Minnesota as on wrestling scholarships. Both of them wrestled there. One of them, Dustin, won a national championship as a true freshman. Very difficult to do.
Yeah.
And that's like, we're talking, world class. And his brother CP was All-American on the US Greco team. Dustin was on the freestyle world team. So now I moved to Minnesota, and both these boys that were my kids' age at the time are now grown men, right? And Dustin is coaching at the university as an assistant coach for the men's varsity team. And they have a regional training center there. So how wrestling works is, you have the Olympic Training Center, and then at different colleges and universities around the country, they have regional training centers. So these are basically professional wrestlers that are either still in college or graduated from college, but they're trying to make an Olympic team, right? They're trying to make the U.S. national team. Right. So I was up there looking for my house, and I went out to dinner with Dustin Slater and a few of the guys from the team that he was friendly with. These are from the national Greco team. And I remember one of them, Pat Smith, 4-time world team member on the Greco US team. And they were like, hey, we got a guy. He's a 97 kilo guy, bigger guy. We don't really have anyone to kind of train and work with him. He's really raw in Greco, was a really good Division III wrestler in college. Would you be willing to come in? And I'm like, man, at this point I'm in my 40s. I'm a dad. My wife is moving to Minnesota. We've never been there. I don't know if I'll be able to disappear, for hours and hours on end, because I know what it takes. And I'm not in shape to do this at this point. But we had a few drinks. The night goes on, and I said, okay, you know what, I'll show up. And so the next week I showed up in the room to train with these guys. And I remember talking to Pat years later, and he's like, man, we left and we're like, that guy's never showing up,
Yeah.
And so I went there, but I kind of like what I want to talk about from a leadership and law enforcement perspective a little bit later is, sometimes just showing up and is what it takes. Right. And and showing up and wanting to be there and being part of what's going on is what it takes to win the day. So because of that, this whole wrestling community at the University of Minnesota, it embraced my family and I.
Oh, wow.
I mean, invited to parties, to tailgates. You know, Coach Egan, the head coach of the team, invited me to travel with the team. I mean, just and I had like an instant set of friends that were 20 years younger than me, but these guys, you're talking about a group of young men that have dedicated themselves to trying to make an Olympic team. This is not, 7-figure signing bonuses going to the NFL or the NBA. I mean, these guys are living on a Spartan stipend.
Yeah.
Trying
no money, no sponsors. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about us as cops, we kind of make the same choice, right? Like I've been a Secret Service agent for 24 years. I mean, there's opportunities in the corporate world for me to go and make real money. Right. And I haven't taken those yet.
Right.
Because I'm still dedicated to what I'm doing here.
Right.
And I just admired these young men so much for that and the work they would put in. And so anyway, COVID hits and I'm still a no-gi. And I remember Mauricio that, again, the black belt at the cellar was like, I'd like to figure out a way to keep training. And I was like, well, I have access to a wrestling room. This was considered a professional sport, so we could still train during COVID. And some of the rest, right. So, and then some of the wrestlers, we also had wrestling mats at strategic locations around the city. So I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, but there might be tournaments in other countries that don't have such stringent rules, and I have an opportunity to do these and make money. I was like, okay, well, let's do it. He goes, but you must wear the gi. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. He goes, you got to wear the gi. He goes, my tournament's going to be in the gi. You got to wear the gi.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not wearing the gi. He goes, wear the gi. Train with me a little bit. I'll give you a brown belt. You deserve it. You should have had a brown belt years ago, but you got to do it with the gi.
Right.
So that was it, man. So I put the gi on and trained with him a little bit. I got my brown belt in Pat Smith's garage on the wrestling mat. And so then Mauricio leaves and comes down here to Florida, and one of his black belts has a detached garage in Minnesota, and none of these guys are cops. Nobody's in law enforcement. And he's like, hey, we're getting a little training session going here, keeping it on the down low, but it's all gi. And it's we're inviting guys who are just very serious about getting better and keeping their training up. So I'd go to this garage in, South Minneapolis, early in the morning, and no heat. I mean, I remember driving in and just seeing it was minus 18 on my car thermometer, and I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And
Why am I doing this?
At this point. And we had a room. Everybody was over 6 foot. Everybody was over 200 pounds. And the lowest belt, I think, was a purple. So I mean, and I'm the oldest one by at least 15 years.
Right.
So, I mean, it was a brutal experience for me. And it was a humbling experience for me. And I'll talk about this too. And this is why I think it's so important for officers, agents. If you're in law enforcement, I think we need to train together, right? So I know what you're going to do. You know what I'm going to do. But I think it's so important for us to train with the community for a couple different reasons. Number one, okay, I realized real quick, there is some really, really tough people out there. Now, these were all good guys, but there's people that aren't so good guys that are really tough and really trained. And it was a good experience for me to see, like, well, these guys, don't have a law enforcement background. Quite honestly, some of them, had the opposite type of background, but they were tough and they were dedicated and they were in shape, they were strong, and they were really, really good at jiu-jitsu. So one great point to train outside of your community, because these are data points now, right? Like maybe the way I approach people in this area is going to be a little different, because, if this gets physical, like I'm going to have my hands full here with a big, strong, younger, trained individual. Two, it allowed me to kind of do some community outreach on a micro level. So these guys got to know me, and we're like, I was texting back and forth with one of them now, and I haven't seen this guy in 3 years, but we just developed a really close friendship. And I think it gives some of these guys a perspective on law enforcement that, and hopefully I was able to change some of their opinions. Right. So, you know, you probably know, you're close, but Minneapolis has a very contentious history between the citizens and the police there, and law enforcement in general, right? And it's a very different community as a whole. I worked there for 5 years, and it's just my personal observations, right? And I should say that you know, I'm not here to represent the Secret Service today. It's just Joe Scargill, but giving you my personal observation is they're very distrusting of the police in Minneapolis, and they're, you know, it's not a friendly relationship. At least it wasn't when I was there. Right. And I believe that I was able to at least give these guys a different view of what they think, whether their view was right or wrong, of what they think of law enforcement and people in law enforcement, right? These guys have been in my house. They've met my wife. They've met my kids. I've met their, you know, girlfriends. I've been in their homes. And I think the more we as badge and gun carrying guys can convince people outside of our community that we're regular people just like them, and that, you know, I don't always need to have a shirt on with the Punisher skull and the American flag and the, you know, which is basically to some people 2 middle fingers right in their face, right? Yeah. But you know, that's why I like training outside of the law enforcement community. I like that outreach, and specifically down here in Florida, I've been able to do that a lot. So, you know, I train in a regular gym. I don't think there's any other law enforcement in there. There's one of the kids' dads is a canine sergeant with the sheriff's office. But other than that, I don't think there's any other ones, and not by choice, but I feel like I've really been able to paint the Secret Service specifically in a great light, at least in my little community, to the point where, you know, we all know what happened July 13th, but not one person has said anything negative to me about the Secret Service, because, you know, I'm on the mat with their kids. I'm on the mat with them. They know what I'm physically capable of. They know the passion and the dedication I put into the kids program, because my kids are in there, right? It's self-serving. But I've been able to be a huge advocate for law enforcement just by being there and doing what I do, right? So, so anyway, got my brown belt training in that freezing cold metal garage. And then right when I left Minnesota in 2022 to come down here, I got my black belt. So I've been a black belt for about 2 years, a little over 2 years. Nice.
Yeah, and the one point you made about, you know, training in the community, I think that's a big deal. You know, at my gym, you know, I try and bring law enforcement officers in, but that's not the you know, the main focus of the gym. You know, they have a huge kids program, a huge adults program. And we have you know, a ton of people from the community, and you know, the law enforcement aspect is just a small aspect of the people who train. So I think it is good, you know, people, you know, see I'm a Chicago police officer. Sometimes they don't even know when they first start training there, you know, and you know, it really doesn't matter that, you know, I'm the police. It's, you know, they just want to train with me and, you know, get some good roles in. And you know, they see me outside of work. You know, work doesn't have to be, you know, the end all be all. A lot of, you know, police officers, their only real community is, you know, other police officers, and they stay kind of in that bubble and just, you know, live with police, work with police, and go out with police. And I think you need to, you know, you need to branch out a little bit and, you know, you know, let yourself be around some other people with different point of views and different things. And you know, especially in the training community. So I definitely believe that you need to go out there. You can't just train all with police. You need to train with other people and train with the community. Absolutely.
It's important, man. And, you know, we fall into this too, you know, in my agency is when your whole circle is just, let's say in my case, you know, Secret Service agents, you start, you know, the complaints, right? And it's just like, you know, and you meet someone out in public and they're like, what do you do for a living? It's like, I'm a Secret Service. They're like, what? That is the coolest job on the planet. And I just spent the last 3 weeks complaining and complaining and complaining, right? And sometimes
Right.
you don't see the forest for the trees, and
Yeah.
and that can become a problem, because then that attitude gets projected back out to the community,
Right.
and the people we're kind of here to serve, right? And that's not good. And I think that creates that, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the people hate the cops. Well, the cops hate the people, and well, why is that? And
Mm.
the more I interact with people in my community, and make friends, and have these experiences, and a guy's sweating and I'm bleeding, and we're training. Well, now when I'm doing my job, I'm doing it for the guy that's making me better on the jiu-jitsu mat. And it's a little bit of a romantic way to look at it, but sometimes that's what you need to get through a 15 or 18-hour day is, I'm out here so that, my buddy John can, him and his wife and kids can have a safe place to live, right? Or I'm
Right.
out here for my own family, right? But sometimes that's not enough, right? Sometimes it's got to be, more. So that's kind of my opinion on it. But it is important for us to train together too,
Yeah.
from an operational standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Because I need to know what you can do. You need to know what I can do. You need to trust me that I have your back. If you turn your back, I need to know that you got my back, right? And also just, okay, well, I'm doing this and I've got the guy's legs. Now I know what you're doing with the upper
Absolutely.
part of his body, or vice versa. So very important that we train together. And we do, before this campaign kicked off, I mean, here in Jacksonville, we had wrestling mats, and we had a room. We'd roll them out, and guys had their gis, and we would train as an office.
Yeah.
Here, the agents, and I talked guys into it, and I have a pretty good sales pitch for why I think anyone carrying a badge and gun should 100% train jiu-jitsu. No excuse, no reason not to. I can't think of one. But I've got a lot of good ones for why you should, and we can certainly get into that if you want.
Yeah. Give me a couple, because I always tell people, time really isn't an excuse. Money shouldn't be an excuse. This is an investment. This is your profession. This is what you do. So I hear a lot of it too, because there's fantastic jujitsu gyms all over Chicago. So I even tell people, even if you don't want to train with me, usually they tell me where they live. And then I tell them a gym that's close to their house and say, hey, you know what? Don't even train with me. Go over to this gym and train over here. But it's kind of hard changing the culture and getting people involved and getting people into training, law enforcement officers especially. Usually once they come and take a couple of trial classes and see what it's about, they really kind of make that connection between what they do on the street and the fundamental basic things that jiu-jitsu can provide for a law enforcement officer. So but yeah, let's hear some of your stuff.
Yeah. So first thing is, you had mentioned it. So I say the number one criteria for picking a jiu-jitsu gym, in my opinion, for a professional, especially in law enforcement, should be proximity.
Yes.
Okay. I found the gym I coach and train at, it's miles from my house in 8 minutes.
Yep.
Okay. I didn't know this guy from Adam. Now he's one of my closest friends, and I spend 6 days a week at this gym teaching and training. But I never heard of the association, A-Force. Never heard of it before. I talked to my professor when I got here. There's no checkmat gym, I got my black belt through the checkmat team. There's no checkmat gym in Jacksonville. I'm just not in a position to start my own gym. So I picked the gym that was closest to my house.
But there's checkmat a lot in Florida, just not in Jacksonville, right?
Yeah, so there's nothing in Jacksonville.
Okay.
So my professor that I got my black belt with, he's over in Riverside Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a suburb of Tampa. I believe he's one of the best jiu-jitsu instructors in the world. If you're over there, I would definitely go there. But here there wasn't, and I'm like, I've got 2 kids, I got a family, I've got a demanding job, I travel. I'm picking a gym that is very close. It worked out. It was a home run.
Yeah.
So the time thing. So you always hear, I don't have time. I don't have time. Well, what do you have time for? Okay. Whether you have, you should make time. Okay. And in conjunction with time, you always hear, and we hear this, in our job, and a lot of cops too, is, well, the agency should provide the training. The agency, we're not getting enough training.
Right.
So my thing to that is, okay, we could talk about how much training we get per year and is it enough? And I think all of us would say, no, of course it's not. Right. So, but let's look at any other profession outside of law enforcement: medicine, finance, risk management, law. if you want to get ahead and you want to be the best, you need to go out and seek out mechanisms that are going to make you better in that career field.
Absolutely.
If you want to manage a hedge fund and be rich, you're not going to sit at Merrill Lynch and say, well, they're not providing me extra things to get me better at my job, so I'm going to sit here until you do. You're going to get fired, or you're going to get left in the dust, right? So to say, as an officer or an agent or whatever, law enforcement or a deputy, to say like, well, the job doesn't do it, so I'm not going to do it. There's no job on the planet that if you want to be the best at it, that you're not going to have to get off your butt and go out and seek out things to make you better, extra education, extra, time in different classes, college degrees, professional certifications. You have to go do those things on your own to get ahead.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
any other line of work. So to think that that's different for law enforcement is crazy. The cost, you got to look at not what it costs, but what it's worth.
Yeah, it's an investment in yourself. You're investing in yourself.
So I look at it like this: to over dramatize this and to paint a horrible picture. If someone takes your gun from you and they're jamming it in your mouth, do you want the last thing to go through your head that, man, I should have spent that $149.99 a month to train? Do you want that to be the last thing going through your head, right? And I'm not saying this can't happen even to someone that's highly trained, right? But what I'm saying is that if I know I've done everything possible, and it's still my numbers, it's not my day,
right?
That is life, and that is just the way life goes, or the way life ends, and that is an unfortunate reality.
Yeah.
But if I know there's things I haven't done, and now my time is up, and I could have prevented that,
right?
So point in case, and you may know about these, John, but when I was in our academy in the Secret Service, we would receive these studies that the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit did about officers that were attacked and killed in the line of duty. Mm-hmm. And I've told this story on another podcast, but one in particular really got my attention, and they had done a psychological profile on this individual, and just a career criminal, total degenerate. Like, I don't have a psychology background. I don't know if you do or not, but you and I could have sat down and written this in 2 seconds, with a couple of beers. Like, total degenerate, horrible experiences with the police his whole life. So this guy made his mind up that he wanted to, career bad guy, made his mind up he wanted to kill a cop, and went out, started his week with bad intention. So went out and got pulled over by a trooper, and I'm sorry, I forget the jurisdiction, but he noticed that the state trooper gets out of the car, notices his shoes are polished, big, fit male, mirrored sunglasses. Guy walks up, super professional with him, and the guy's like, didn't attack him. And the interviewer asked why not. He goes, I didn't think I could take him. He was big, he looked strong, he was very professional and very polite, so he didn't set me off. Drives around later that week, gets pulled over again. The same thing. Door opens, notices the shoes polished. Female officer. Comes up to the car, notices she's squared away. She's polite, direct. Doesn't attack her. Like, why not? He goes, well, was a girl. Maybe could have physically taken her, but wasn't sure, and didn't want to lose that confrontation and go to jail, and then have to have that kind of part of my history that I got beat up and arrested by a woman. Right. Third encounter with law enforcement, gets pulled over later in the week again. Door opens, notices the shoes are scuffed. Overweight male officer out of the car, disheveled, gets up to the vehicle, unprofessional, very direct, yelling at him. And he notices, now this guy probably had, maybe a high school education, maybe not, notices that there's dust on the keeper on his holster.
Mm.
And in his mind processes this, as you know, this guy hadn't been training and got the jump on him and killed him.
Right. Yeah.
So to think these guys aren't sizing us up, right? To think, I mean, we get this all the time
Oh, absolutely.
in the Secret Service. You know, we're on a rope line or we're interacting with the crowd. Even the ones that don't want to do harm, you don't think they're noticing.
Absolutely.
You know, and I mean, like one of the biggest points of pride I always have, right, is like, you know, when they're like, man, it looks like they brought, you know, the A team out today, right? And again, it doesn't have to be your physical size. I just told you that female officer projected the same image that I project, right? And
Right.
she's, you know, I'm 6'3" and 220 pounds, so she wasn't that big, and so a lot of it's not how you look physically. Of course, that helps, right? But it's are you in the best shape you can be at that size? Are you trained, and what is your mindset, right? Do I know that, well, I've rolled, you know, 2, 3, 4 times a week for the last 8 years. You know, if this doesn't go my way, I feel like I'm prepared to deal with it. This has also given me an ability to more calmly interact. And I think maybe I've heard you talk about this before, you too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to be that screaming maniac with a beet red face when I'm interacting with someone, even if this situation is very, very tense, because I've been in situations where I'm having my arm jammed across my throat and someone squeezed the hell out of me. And, you know, and so I'm able to kind of manage that situation in a controlled environment, which allows me to manage it in an uncontrolled environment. So again, reason to train is just, even before you put your hands on someone, you have a quiet confidence that's going to allow you to project that to who you're dealing with.
Absolutely. And when you don't, and I've been on calls with, you know, plenty of calls in my career, and I can see it when I watch a newer officer and when they're encountering, you know, a stressful situation or a traumatic incident or something like that. You could see it. You could see it on them. You could see the fear. You could see the, you know, the confidence that they don't have because they haven't been in this situation. So the appearance is really part of it, and especially with like state troopers. I know they work by themselves. So I think a big part of, you know, the state troopers are, you know, looking squared away, looking the part. And because you're by yourself and there is no backup for a long ways, a lot of these state troopers, especially, you know, I know the Illinois state troopers out here, they have big stretches of road and they're by themselves out there. So looking squared away when somebody sees you, they really make that decision in their mind, like, can I take this person? Do they look confident? Do they look like I can, you know, get the upper hand on them? So appearance is part of it. And like you said, it's been studied and looked at. Yeah.
It sets the tone, man. Right. And like, forget about even like, it just sets the tone for how the interaction is going to go. You know, I have one of my closest friends in the Secret Service is the deputy special agent in charge there in Chicago, in your neck of the woods. He doesn't train jujitsu, but this guy looks the part. You know, he's in shape. He's confident. He's very squared away. You know, he's very well spoken. And when, you know, when he walks in a room and he talks, man, people listen, right? Like,
sure.
You know, we're here talking about jujitsu, but it doesn't even have to be that.
No,
but I think it should be. And so I'll tell you why now. So, you know, I think we left off at cost. So, you know, look, you've just got to decide. You've just got to make a decision, like what it's worth. Right. Eventually, you're going to get a black belt and you'll be able to teach and you won't have to pay anymore, right? So you got to look at it like that. Like that takes a long time. And again, I you know, my big tagline is like, I got an Ivy League jiu-jitsu education on a community college budget because I've just been really, really lucky to meet very generous people. And I've had some wrestling coaching to trade for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So, you've trained with some amazing people. Yeah, absolutely.
I have it, and I'll tell you off air, like I paid little or no money for that, and it's because of, you know, again, a willingness to again, you know, coach some wrestling, coach some no-gi stuff, and I have just kind of a different game, and people seem to like it, but you know, it always starts out with having to pay, right? And I never go into these relationships thinking this is not going to cost me money, so you know, I just kind of make it it's part of my budget, and you know, we're all government employees, so you know, I'm not floating in money, so you have to make sacrifices in other areas, and you know, especially us cops, like guys won't think twice about buying a $1,200 you know, laser sight to put on your personal
exactly
weapon. But you know, that could cover almost that
Right.
there's 6 months of jujitsu right there, right? And
Right. Or
and,
new
we've
rims
all
for
heard
the
it a million
Jeep or something.
times.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, lift
Right.
kit on your Jeep or whatever. And look, it's your money. You earn it. You spend it how you want.
Right.
But don't tell me you can't afford it. Again, you got to
Right.
think about what it's worth. And
Yeah.
think of all the we've all got these buddies, right, that have these guns that have $6,000-7,000 into them,
Yeah.
and it's like the
Lost you there for a second. Oh, we lost you for a second. We'll cut that.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So I'll just back up a little bit, and then So think about these. We've all got these buddies in law enforcement, right, that have these guns that are $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 more with all these things. I'm like, that thing, it comes out of your safe, once or twice a year when you shoot it.
Right.
You could have had years of jujitsu training for that kind of money, and it's probably your third or fourth one, right? And again, I'm not telling officers or law enforcement officers what they should do with their money. But think of all the times you may have to put your hands on someone, right? For you, a patrol officer, nightly almost, right? And
it is. And on a daily basis, I'm touching another human being, probably. Yeah.
So especially, and we all know when these confrontations break bad, and it's at the time of arrest, usually,
right when the handcuffs. Yeah.
I'm not saying there's not people out there that the minute you show up, the fight is on. But this is not the norm. The norm is, at least statistically, when I go to put handcuffs on, this person realizes the gravity of their situation, and their fight or flight response kicks in.
Yes.
And they are trying to get away. And my personal safety is not their first concern. Absolutely. Although they may not want to attack me specifically,
right.
They want to get away, and now I'm attached to them. And this is where I think jiu-jitsu and wrestling are a huge advantage. And again, I don't want to test my techniques at 1 or 2 a.m. if I'm a police officer for the first time that I learned 6 months ago in an in-service training. Okay. Or if I'm a Secret Service agent, I don't want to have to put that technique to the test on a rope line, right? Or in a hallway when there's someone we're protecting, 20 feet behind me. So I want to train this in a gym on a weekly or daily or monthly basis, and make sure that I'm confident doing it in that environment. So with the hopes of, if this actually happens, I'm prepared.
Yeah.
So the money thing, I think, you just have to look at what your priorities are and what is important and what makes sense. And does it make sense to have thousands of dollars tied up in the things that 100% may save your life? But if we're playing the law of averages, what am I going to need more? Is it going to be jiu-jitsu? And then why jiu-jitsu? So Muay Thai, boxing, striking arts are fantastic. And I am not here to say that if I square up in a ring and someone that knows Muay Thai could not knock me out before I get a hold of them. Not saying that at all.
In law enforcement, I think there's a small area in certain conditions for strikes, but it's not the average. The average is you need a grappling base, which is, jiu-jitsu, right?
100%. 100%. And if what I'm going to do and what my training methodology is, I am preparing myself for the most likely confrontation and the worst case scenario.
Correct.
Okay. Those are the two things that I personally prepare myself for in life and professionally and personally. So what are the two most likely things? That I'm going to have hands on someone and they are going to break bad. And the worst case scenario, I am on the ground and someone is standing over top of me. Those are the two worst case scenarios for me. I think you'd agree.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so then I look, what prepares me, the best for these? Well, I've got my hands on someone. I need to take them to the ground. 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 I need to take them to the ground jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
Right.
I am on the ground on my back and someone is standing over me. What prepares me the best for that? Jiu-jitsu to control them, or wrestling to wrestle myself back up and or reverse the position, right? So that's my strategy and my philosophy. I prepare myself for the two worst situations.
Yeah.
I've got hands on someone and the situation turns physical, or two, I am on the ground with someone standing over top of me. Yeah. I think striking is great, and I agree with you. There is instances where I may have to do that, but it is 2024. Like it or not, law enforcement is not the most popular thing. I told you before, I'm 6'3" and 220 pounds. If I am laying into someone, justified or not,
the optics are terrible. Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that the best way? Is that going to help me personally? Is that going to help the image of my agency? Is that going to help the law enforcement community in general? And is it going to help the general public have more support for us?
Right.
Because what do they, I mean, we see in shootings all the time, the uneducated masses, what do they say? He could have shot him in the leg. He could,
exactly.
So like if that's a public perception, then they're really, if they see someone my size laying into someone smaller than me with punches or elbows, justified or not, that's not going to fly. Right now, I'm not saying that I'm not going to do that if I need to, but if I don't have to, maybe I could more safely control them. The other issue with the striking is that let's say I don't lay them out, and now and now I hit them. Well, what are they going to do? Now they're going to hit me back.
Exactly.
Right. So now what's going to happen? Now I'm going to escalate. I'm going to move to an intermediate weapon. Now, maybe they pull, so now who's escalating this confrontation?
Absolutely.
Is this me that escalated it, or is it the suspect that escalated it? It's me.
Right. In the time you're striking, you could probably be putting hands on and doing control techniques and in getting, closing the distance, getting them to the ground and doing all those things. So strikes don't gain compliance, and pain compliance doesn't, have a high percentage in law enforcement either. What does is control techniques, which is, jiu-jitsu, grappling. These are things that control another human being. And it's, strikes are, limited capacity in law enforcement. I've never, you could strike somebody 20 times. They still might put their hands behind their back. You have to physically get them to put their hands behind their back. So that's why I always think control, techniques are always better than strikes and to gain compliance, because you still have to put handcuffs on. Same with a taser. Even if you tase somebody, you still have to go hands on eventually and put handcuffs on them.
Yes, exactly. So my point exactly is that no matter what I've done prior in the timeline, there is a red line in every confrontation where that person's going to jail, where I need to physically put hands on them and they are not fighting.
Right.
Okay. So whether the fight was on beforehand, even if I shot them, right, and now I go to put hands on the handcuff them, that whole situation can start again, and now I've got hands on, right? So now I'm very limited in what I can do.
Right.
And like you said, if someone's not giving me their hands, but they're not attacking me, and I'm knocking the hell out of them, right? Again, is this the best look?
Right. Exactly.
And things have just changed so much in our profession that you don't want to be. I mean, even if you're justified, man, now your family is, getting harassed, watching that video. It's all over the internet. Like, I want this conversation to go viral, right? I don't want me punching someone half my size in the face at a political rally to go viral. And again, I'm prepared to do what I need to do, but I'm not. But if I can take someone to the ground and I can control them on the ground, and let's face it, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu positions that are, even if you don't practice them with a gun belt on or any, that are inherently safe for you as a law enforcement officer, right? Knee on belly.
Neon belly is one of the best. Yeah.
It is a great position. You're up. You can see the crowd. If there's multiple attackers, your gun is back, side control, even mount, especially if you're smart and underhooking on your gun side. So people always say, the sport jujitsu. I mean, come on, man. In any combat sport, even if someone's never trained, quote, self-defense, I'll take a Golden Gloves boxer, put you in a ring with them. You can do whatever you want. And they're only allowed to box. They'll kill you, right? So same with jiu-jitsu. Like, the black belt that owns our gym, John, like, this guy's a monster, man. Like he's never been a cop, and he's trained only jujitsu. But I mean, in the street, that guy will kill somebody that's untrained. You know what I mean? Like, figurative kill. So to think that, like, even if you go and all you do is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I would think even if you took all the police officers in the country, all law enforcement officers in the country, put them through a year of fundamental jiu-jitsu to get them to a blue belt where they train consistently, that would change the country's use of force throughout the country. Just having just basic sport jiu-jitsu and getting these officers just a blue belt level is a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, just not even train with a gi on and a belt, and don't ever put a gun belt on. Don't ever put BDUs on. Just train a traditional sport jiu-jitsu. You're going to be, so Mauricio, my professor, he always says, like, he doesn't teach a lot of the fancy inverted stuff. And he had a great, like, there's always genius in simplicity. And his thing is like, Joe, he goes, the fancy stuff that worked for somebody. He goes, the basics work for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. So just, and my game's like super basic, dude. It's like, I had, surgery on my neck a couple years ago. Like, I don't invert.
Right. Black belts do the basics at a very high level. That's what it is. If you watch black belts, they do the basics at a very high level, the fundamentals at a very high level. Can they do other things? Sure. But they need the foundational jiu-jitsu is really still the game. Yeah.
And you know why they don't? Because especially in the gi, right? So why they don't do can they do those fancy things? Yeah, of course they can. But you look at the highest level competitors, they don't do it because if you fail, you're in a compromised position.
Yes.
So they stick with the basics because, if you try a sweep from guard and it doesn't work, where are you? You're still in guard, right? If you're on the mount and you try a Kimura and the guy slips his arm, you're still in mount. If you try a cross collar choke from mount and it doesn't work, you're still in mount, right? So right. they and wrestling's the same way, right? Is people take they take their basic shots, but from different angles and things like that. And a lot of them, why? Because if it doesn't work, you're still safe, right? You're not in danger of getting on your back. And like if you even look at, like, when I taught in the canine section, we always teach the dogs to bite with a full mouth, right? So like the gum to the target, but you're training them against instinct, right? So when you look at animals in the wild, whether it's lions or whatever, when they hunt, they bite, but they don't bite with a full mouth. And the reason for that is if their prey turns on them, they can get the hell out of there. They're not fully committed,
they can detach. Right? Absolutely. So yes.
So they're not fully committed. So if this confrontation breaks bad, they can detach, right? Which is why I like basic jiu-jitsu so much is because, look, if I'm in knee on belly and this guy reaches in his waistband, I can get out of there and draw my weapon, or I can switch to something else. The fancy stuff, you're kind of tangled up in those legs and upside down, and if this doesn't go my way, now I've got a big problem. So I 100% agree with you. Like, get to a blue belt level and practice the basics for your job.
If you're a law enforcement officer, you could just take fundamentals class forever, and that's all you need. And just stay there and don't worry about the belts and worry about moving up if you wanted to. And your game would be fantastic, and it would change your use of force. And usually what happens is, these law enforcement, get in. I didn't get in for the belts, but I kept training. I fell in love with jiu-jitsu and I kept moving up. But, if you just take fundamental jiu-jitsu and continue to do that, your look at use of force and how you use force is definitely going to change. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm kind of the same as you. Like, I cared less about the belt until I got my brown belt. And then I was like, well, now I should probably get a black belt. It also gives me it gives you a little bit more credibility too.
Sure.
As an instructor but yeah, I mean, like I said, like the 35-year-old purple belt version of myself, and nobody especially could kill the 50-year-old version I am now, just from a pure physicality standpoint, right? But I know a lot more now. I don't know, maybe I could catch myself in a weird leg lock if I wasn't expecting it, but I know a lot more now. So
And it's not, you don't
You
have
know,
to be
I
the
think the other
toughest person on the mats. It's, you just got to be able to survive your next street encounter. That's how I look at it. And I'll take getting beat up on the mats if it helps me on the street. So
100%, 100%. And
yeah.
the other thing, man, is it puts some substance behind the title, I think, right? And
Mhm.
I do a lot of leadership coaching and some public speaking, and for some companies and things like that. And one of the things I always say is, like, you got to have substance behind these titles. So everyone wants to be called operator, chief, general, agent
Yeah.
in charge, special agent, officer, right? When things are going well and things aren't in question. Dad,
Mhm.
mom, right? Everyone loves these titles. Oh, your kids are so well behaved. Oh my God, your kid did so well at the game. But where you fill up the tank on those is when things aren't going well, right? Is where, okay, well, now you're the officer, handle this situation, diffuse this situation, control this guy.
Right.
Don't embarrass yourself, don't embarrass your department. Like,
Hmm.
I'll tell you a story this morning, right? So I have kids, I have twin boys, and they're obviously immersed in law enforcement, and because of what I do for a job. So we stopped at Dunkin' Donuts today on the way to school, and there was a patrol car in the drive-through of Dunkin' Donuts. And my son made a comment. He goes, "Hey, Dad, like on all the cartoons and The Simpsons, they always have a fat cop eating donuts. Look, ha ha ha."
Yeah.
But like, it's funny, but like, maybe you shouldn't be in the drive-through line in your patrol car getting a donut, because
Mhm.
that's the perception. And
Right.
if you want to change that,
Hmm.
it's got to start with each individual one of us, right? And
Yeah.
again, it's kind of like, the department should provide me the training. Well, maybe you shouldn't be like, how about step one? Don't get in the Dunkin' Donuts line in your patrol car,
Yeah.
because that guy or girl who was in the car didn't look, maybe could have been the most fit officer, 7-time Mondials champion,
Hmm.
destroyed me. But perception's reality, right?
Yeah.
And so what the general public is seeing is a patrol car in a Dunkin' Donuts line, and everybody's laughing.
Yeah. And that's a very good point, because that's, almost one of the reasons I started on Instagram and doing stuff. I was kind of more of an introvert. I wasn't into, publicly showing what I did. But instead of, telling law enforcement officers, how good jujitsu is, and I just put it on Instagram and say, look at what I do and look at how it connects with law enforcement. So I think just, the first thing you need to do is set the example and lead by example, and then eventually others will follow, and they'll see what you're doing. They'll see you're doing good things. And I'm a big believer in that. And to go back to what you were saying about, the cost and starting in jujitsu, and really the way I looked at it when I became, a police officer, I just said to myself, can I handle what comes at me to the best of my ability? And I figured I needed some supplemental training to do that. And I needed to be better prepared, and I needed to do things on my own to be a better police officer. And I always look at it too. If, you call the police, do you want me coming to help you out? Am I going to be the best officer I can be to do this job the right way and handle a situation? If my family were to call 911, would they want me to show up there and knowing that I could handle the situation? And it's a real simple concept of, you don't choose the day chooses you. And either you're
Sure.
going to, and that's how it is in law enforcement. You go through long periods of not much going on, but one day, one time, that could be, your moment. And if you're not prepared, you're not prepared. And that's just the reality of it. And I think a lot of us think, it won't be us, and it's not going to happen to us. But we've all, lost officers in the line of duty. We've seen officers, killed or injured, and all kinds of ways. And so I just think, I just wanted to do the best I could to be prepared for, what happens on the street and what could happen on the street. If it never does, fantastic. But if it does, I'd want to say, hey, I did the best I could. I prepared as much as I could, and I did the best I can,
Yeah, man, you're exactly right. It kind of starts um, at home, right? And like, what does anyone want? But like us, we do this job because we want respect, right? And you want to be respected as a professional and as a person, right? So it starts in the morning when I get up. Like, I've got two little boys, and no one will keep you more honest than a little kid, right?
Yeah, it's
Hey,
true.
Dad, why are you
Yeah.
eating that? I thought you said that's bad. I thought you said that's bad for you. Hey, Dad, like you
Mhm.
told me I can't have a soda, but you're having a beer and it's Wednesday. Hey, Dad, like, did you work out today? You told me to do, hey, Dad, did you train? You're taking me to training. So, like, number one is like, I want to establish credit, and also the title, right? Like, I'm a Secret Service agent. My kids go to school and tell everybody what I do.
Absolutely.
Most of the
Yeah.
kids don't believe them. They don't believe them,
Right. Yeah. Well,
but
sure.
but
Yeah.
like, if I walk in there and I don't look the part, like
Mhm.
I've just not only deflated the expectation that all these kids have,
Yeah.
but what my sons have, right? So, um, and then again, looking the part's a big deal, and then having the substance behind it, like that.
Yeah.
Kids they go to school with, their parents train at the jiu-jitsu gym. It's a small community here. Their kids train it, so like this kind of I've got to keep my level at a fairly proficient
Yeah.
one, just to maintain the image that I've tried to develop here. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, but you're right, and like no one goes through more years of things not happening than the Secret Service, right? And like we always say, the best protective visit is the one no one talks about because nothing happened, right? And if
Right.
something happens, as we can see, like it's bad, and
Yes.
so to really like what the hell do I need to be training for, man? Like I'm in the stairwell again, or why am I I'm here again? And I'm not talking about I don't get to work and I'm like, all right, let's go. Of course, you're relaxed, you're not looking for these confrontations, but your mind is trained from years and years of doing this,
Mhm.
of keeping yourself in physical condition, of spending time on the jiu-jitsu mats, to
Yeah.
where like you want it to be a reaction, right? You don't want to have
Yeah.
to think about, oh my God, this guy just grabbed me. Like, now what do I do? Do I grab him? You want it to just be like, come on, man.
Yeah.
It's a reaction, but you can still be calm
Yeah.
and
And
confident interacting
especially,
with people. And I think that's what,
yeah. Right. Especially in the Secret Service, I'm sure your days are, typically the same. Everything runs smooth, runs smooth, runs smooth, runs at a high level. But the one time it doesn't, that's the time where you need to be prepared. Absolutely.
yeah. And I mean, like, you never know what's going to happen. Right. But to just say like, what people always say, like, well, you may do all this training, but you don't know what you would do if something really happened. And I'm like, well, I know what I would have more faith in knowing what I would do versus if I wasn't trained.
Yes.
Let's say that, right?
Yeah.
So like think about baseball. Like, well, you don't know if you're going to strike out or get a hit when you get up
Mm.
there. Yeah, but I still practice my swing, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't know if you're going to make that 3-pointer. Yeah,
Right.
but I'm still going to shoot it. But I'm still going to shoot it and practice that so that my
Yeah.
percentage is higher. Right? You're right. Like,
Yeah.
I may grab a hold of someone and, hey, man, they might have been a 4-time NCAA champion, and
Yeah.
they're having a bad day, and
Yeah.
now the fight's on, right? And I'm in trouble. But think of how much trouble I'd be in if I didn't train. Like
Yeah.
maybe I'd at least have a chance getting this person in my guard and
Exactly.
holding on to him until
Right.
I could get a call out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And if you don't
Because
train,
I think
what
that's
the
why.
outcome is. The outcome is going to be terrible if you don't train. The outcome. Yeah.
Correct. And
Right.
the other thing I like about jujitsu is in our line of work, especially for uniformed officers, you're calling for assistance. Like a tie is a win on the street, right? If it's one-on-one and I get a tie, I can wrap you up to where you're not hitting me, you're not getting my gun.
Yeah.
Even if I'm in my guard, I've won that confrontation.
Absolutely.
If we're in a striking confrontation, we tie, you've punched me in the face 5 times, I've punched you in the face 5 times, that's not good for me.
No.
So again, this is again why I like jujitsu. I look at, percentages. What is my percentage of success? Well, there's 3 outcomes in a fight: a tie, a loss, or a win.
Mhm.
With jujitsu, I have an opportunity to get 2 of the 3, and they're
Right.
good outcomes for me.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
don't think there's any other combat art where getting a tie is good.
Right.
Because we get a tie in judo, you throw me on my head, I throw you on yours. We get a tie in boxing, you punch me in the face, I punch you. Karate, you kick me, I kick you. Right? Those are all bad things for me. But jiu-jitsu, you take me down, I put you in guard. This is you would win 2-0. But if we're not scoring points, right? You put me down. We hit the ground, I put you in guard. You can hit me, or we hit the ground, I fall into your guard. and I'm controlling you. I'm not trying to pass your guard. I'm trying to hold you there till more officers arrive,
Right.
more agents get in.
Yeah.
So I think that's another reason why I like jujitsu is I like to back up my statements with data. And if we look at the three outcomes in a physical confrontation, I'm training for two of the three.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a good, 66%, pretty good if you're only dealing with three things.
Yeah. It's funny you said you like to back your statements up with data because this week a study just came out and it was done by it's in the Sports Journal and it was done by two PhDs and then it was done by Brian Sunderman, who's in charge of the Texas Public Safety Department. And I don't know, have you had a chance to look at this yet or see a little bit of it?
You sent it to me. I looked through it. Yeah.
Yeah. I did some brief look. So basically it looked at, the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on veterans and first responders, focusing on physical health, psychological benefits, and the benefits for use of force. These are all things like when I'm reading this, I kind of knew. So if you haven't looked at this yet, check out the Sports Journal, and I'll add it on my Instagram page too, so you can find the link. But some great stuff in here, and it talked about like how you're going to get better outcomes, with jujitsu and officers that train, their physical and mental health, like how we talked about being, doing well and performing well under stress. These are all the the benefits. So there's some hard data on this stuff that, like yourself, myself, we tell other people and say, hey, these, you're going to get better at this, you're going to get better at this. But there's actual, physical data out there now that, they've researched for, a period of time and said, yeah, these things do work, and these, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has, many, many benefits for law enforcement officers. They also talked about veterans here with PTSD and the benefits of that. So it was a really kind of deep dive and I'm still kind of going through it, but some great stuff in here and some actual hard data, that shows, this stuff, the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I think it's great.
So one of the things I forgot to mention about training at a school too, and again, this is all stuff you and I is common sense just from doing it for years and years. But you're gonna make friends, right? You're gonna make friends with people that you never thought you'd be friends with, right? So like I told you, I have some secondary employment where I do, kind of motivational leadership speaking for businesses. I got my first client from a jiu-jitsu mat. So, I was training down here at Ponte Vedra Beach Jiu-Jitsu, Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. And I met, there's another black belt that's training here. And him and I just, I don't know, he was, had a college wrestling background too. And, we kind of just gravitated towards each other. He has a really, good game. He's a Gracie Baja black belt. I'm a checkmat black belt. So different styles. So, and we just got to be friendly. And, I would talk, I asked him what he did, and he was a managing partner of this financial insurance company. And, I would tell him what I did and tell him like just little stories. We'd grab lunch at the diner after training. And he'd be like, man, you've got these wild stories. He goes, did you ever think about talking to, like, would you ever be interested in talking to my company just about some of your experiences? And I was like, well, I've never done anything like that before. And, but I said, sure, and I was nervous about it. I've done a ton of public outreach about operational things in the Secret Service, but never about myself. Right. And, they teach us humility and things like that in jiu-jitsu. So you're never really comfortable doing it. So I went and spoke to his company, and, the president of their company was like, dude, we want to pay you to come out and talk to our national sales team. So later this month, I'm going out for this company, and I'm going to speak to their sales team and their leadership team, just, again, about leadership and motivation and things that I've developed. So, yeah, kind of a cool story that, I'm, like I said, I'm eligible to retire. Like I'd love to be able to do that sort of thing for a living and spread the word and spread the message. And, from jiu-jitsu, it looks like I'm going to, at least get started doing that, which not saying everyone's going to have that experience, but if nothing else, you're going to, like, I've met people, my wife have become friends with their wives, their kids get into jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And, there's no better activity. And I got an amazing sales pitch if you got officers that that have children and you want to put them in it, which again is another added cost. I get it, but I think traditional sports are great. Basketball, football, baseball. I grew up playing those sports too. But the one thing about those sports is they get to a point where you may love those sports, but they don't love you back, right? Like, so basketball, you know, you're going to be limited genetically to how tall you are, how fast you are, how explosive you are, right? And by the time, and football, those sports stop loving most of us back at a point, and it's usually by high school, right? And these high schools are super competitive, at least, you know, down here. So with jiu-jitsu, wrestling, you know, it takes very little natural athletic ability. I'm not saying it doesn't play a part, right? And we've all seen these physical freaks that come on the mat and, you know, they're like, man, they're crushing guys like, you know, that are black and brown belts. You're like, man, how's this guy doing this? Okay, but we're not talking about the 1%. I'm talking about the rest of us normal guys.
Right.
You can get very, very good at jiu-jitsu. You can get very, very good at wrestling, even get to the college level, by having very little physical talent, but being willing to show up and work hard at it and falling in love with it. And you know, I'm 6'3", 220. My wife is 5'3" and 100. So the chance of my kids being, you know, 6'8" is very slim. And the chance of them being 250 pounds, very slim. So, you know, these sports, there's weight classes, right? So whether you're a giant or whether you're tiny, if you want to compete in jiu-jitsu or you want to compete in wrestling, there's a place for you. Yeah. And if you're willing to put the work in, you know, my sons had a very rough start to life medically. And you know, they spent 10 weeks in the NICU before they were born. And, you know, my one son had a stroke and he's, you know, had amazing medical care and therapists, but he's been on a wrestling mat when I was coaching at the university since he was in diapers. And he's learned, you know, we started with just, you know, wrestling, tumbling, rolling, you know, picking up a 1 pound medicine ball and walking with it. I mean, he's 9 years old now. And I mean, we had practice last night. There's kids much bigger than him that can't pass his guard. Yeah. You know, he's not a takedown machine. He's not overpowering people, but he's got a really, really good guard and very difficult to pass it. And because he's put the time in, and I've been honest with him about it, right? Is like, if you're a smaller officer or you're if you're a little bit out of shape, I've been honest with him. I said, hey, you've got some physical limitations that other kids don't have. No one cares. I care because I'm your dad and I love you, but you've got to put the work in to overcome those things. So like, that's the other excuse you always hear is like, oh, I'm out of shape, right? Well, if you're out of shape, even more reason, right? Yes. Like you're out of shape, your chance of winning a confrontation on the street, you are hoping that this person complies with you. Yeah. You're hoping. Then that's not a good, hope is not a good strategy. No, you want to get in shape, come to jiu-jitsu. That's the perfect time to come to jiu-jitsu. You're out of shape. Great. You know what? And like, and you're going to have to, which I had to learn with the gi, right? You're going to have to check your ego and understand, like, I'm walking in this room, I'm a cop or I'm an agent or I'm in law enforcement. I'm out of shape and I'm going to be embarrassed. Yeah. You're going to lose a lot. I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to be sucking wind probably during the warm up. And when I eventually get to spar, I am going to get destroyed. Yeah. And I'm going to have to overcome that. But that's a good part of it, man, because maybe now when you're in your job professionally, you know this and you're taking steps to make it better. So now maybe that interaction, like, I'm going to try to not let this get physical because I know I'm not going to win. Yeah. You know your capabilities. Yeah. And that's what nice thing about jiu-jitsu or wrestling. It's your individual aspects. You can't turn and ask a teammate for help. There is no help. You have to do it yourself. Yeah. That's what's great. Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, if you learn to check your ego in defeat, you can carry that into victory, right? And now it's like, well, now I'm a brown belt and I'm in shape and I've been doing this for 8 years and I'm really good. And I know most of these confrontations I'm going to win. So no reason to even get it going. Right. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and then that projection causes some compliance, right? And there's a lot of data to back that up. So I've got an answer for every excuse not to do it.
Yeah.
Again, and like I said, I have a son who was, his prognosis was wheelchair at best, leg braces,
Mm.
and he played baseball, wrestles, jujitsu now, and again, a little bit of luck, a lot of good medical help, and a lot of time on the mat.
Yeah.
A lot of time on the mat.
That's amazing. That's
Um,
amazing.
and it's I got asked on another podcast, do I think that helped? I go, I don't think it helped. I know
No, it helped. Yeah.
his situation would have been a lot more severe if we wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
And again, smart about it, right? Like, I didn't put him in tournaments. There was a big tournament down here last fall. I let my other son compete, and I was very proud of him. He won double gold. No one scored a point on him. But I didn't let the other one compete. I told him, I said, I know you want to, but you're not ready yet.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. But this is jujitsu, right? As you go the first few days and you go the first few months and you're out of shape and you're out of breath, you're not ready yet. But as you're learning, you're getting yourself ready, and now you're ready, right? And it's just time. It's just time and effort. There's no secret to it. You just keep showing up and putting the effort forth, and trying to get better and humbling yourself. You're going to eventually get good.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the individual aspect is what I love about it. It's the only one you really have to blame is yourself. If you had a bad night, you're not doing it. You can't turn to your teammates or anyone else. It's all about you and your individual progress. And that's what I really enjoy about it. And people with limited abilities and less abilities than others, that's fine too. You could still train jujitsu and do certain aspects of it. You might not have, all the attributes, but there's definitely spots, for everyone to train in jiu-jitsu. And I've only seen it improve people's lives, and yeah, that just like it did with your sons, and probably made a huge difference in his life.
And so the other one, the last most common one I hear is, I don't want to get hurt. That's the other one, is like,
Yeah.
I don't want to get hurt. And I said, okay, well, I can't promise you won't get hurt, but I can promise you this, that if you train and someone says you don't, you will get hurt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's fundamental class that everyone has to go through, at least in our gym, right? I think this is pretty good. And there's no sparring in the fundamental class, positional stuff, but you go to that first, right? And like you condition your body and you condition your mind. Yes, there's freak accidents on jiu-jitsu mats. There is. But I can tell you this. Years and years of competitive wrestling and years of jiu-jitsu. Like, I participate in combat sports. I'm 50. So 40 years.
That's all right. We lost you for a second there. You're back.
I'll back up. So I started, with combat sports when I was 10. I'm 50. So 40 years experience. I had never had a acute traumatic injury. I broke my ankle in college. It was the most severe thing I've had done.
Right.
Lifting weights and running. Man, I tore my meniscus. I jacked up. I tore my rotator cuff. Right. So again, I'm not saying don't lift and don't run. I still do both those things religiously. I lift 5-6 days a week. I run a couple times a week. I'm not. These are good things, but I'm just saying, like, if you approach this with humility and you don't go crazy and you take it slow with jiu-jitsu, and you realize, like, I'm not going to walk in the first day and I'm going to learn how to do this. It's a process. It takes years.
Yeah.
And it takes I think it takes a solid 8 months minimum to get comfortable in some of the basic positions, and a year minimum to feel like you're learning jiu-jitsu. So it's very stressful the first few months, especially if you've got to check the ego. But the risk of injury, I would always, especially in traditional gi jiu-jitsu, I would advocate is very low. Especially, like you said, it's an individual thing. If you keep your mind under control and you keep yourself under control, the injury happens when you're not controlling what you're doing.
Right. Exactly.
not someone doing something to you generally, especially in a fundamentals class.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
you can
And yeah,
oversimplify it. Like my professor always says, why, how are you going to get injured? Just tap.
yeah,
You're not going to get
exactly.
injured. You just tap
Right.
if you feel,
Yeah.
I would say, getting out of bed in the morning, you're risking injury. So yeah, I mean, of course you're doing something dynamic. There is a risk there. I'm not going to say there's no risk, but
Yeah.
I think the risk of what could happen to you if you get into a confrontation of someone that is trained is much greater.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that too. And yeah, the risks of not training are far outweigh the risks of training. And I've been training for, many years, and I've had just minimal stuff, little
Yeah, little
jam,
things. Yeah,
yeah, jam
fingers.
fingers and stuff like that. Yeah, but nothing major. But just to switch gears, I'm going to tell you we're kind of on the shot clock here. We got about 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
So I see you're wearing an Extreme Couture shirt. So
Yeah.
I I just I had been talking to people, in the industry, who have been, kind of in the industry for a long time. One of those people was Chad Lyman, and
Yeah, I know Chad.
Chad runs C4 PJJ. I'm going out
Hmm.
to meet Chad in Las Vegas, and I'm actually going to train at Extreme Couture in about
Oh,
2 weeks.
nice.
Yeah, I'll be there. So it's my first time going out there. So Chad's going to take care of me. I'm going to go to a no-gi class with Chad and take one of his classes at Extreme Couture. So yeah, tell me the connection with yourself and Randy Couture.
Oh, so we've kind of run into each other, through the wrestling community. And I told you he came to our academy one time to do some training with us. And then, so when I was in Bulgaria, I was, as I said earlier in the podcast, I have 5 years as a Secret Service agent and as an attaché there. Randy was filming a movie, I think one of the Expendables movies in Bulgaria. They have a huge movie studio there. They
Oh
film
yeah.
a lot of American-based movies. So we reconnected through another wrestler that's a Secret Service agent. He wrestled at Iowa, and we would train every day. So there, we would just go to the gym and we would train, and then we just got to become very close. So we would hang out, go to dinner, grab drinks. But again, I talk about that Ivy League education on a community college budget. Like basically, one-on-one training with Randy Couture for however many months he was over there, 4 times a week, just him and I. Talk about getting good,
Right. Exactly.
especially at defense,
What a great training
especially at
partner.
defense, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
so so I mean, to say I had, the at the best MMA fighter, on the planet, as my training partner,
Yeah. That's awesome.
was just unbelievable. And you know, again, that guy is such a loyal friend. Forget about the fame and stuff like that, which what he's achieved in the sport and across different industries is just amazing, right? But the loyalty and the friendship that guy has. So he every year for my kid's birthday, no matter where I am, Minnesota, Texas, Florida now, he flies to where I am for my kid's birthday and goes to their party, cuts their birthday cake. And it's just part of the whole party we do for them every year, and they call him Uncle Randy, and he loves it, and but you take a guy who's that famous, who's got that busy of a schedule, between appearances and movies and interviews, and blocks off my kid's birthday every year.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's pretty. Talk about humbling, right? So
Yeah.
so like I love that guy. I would do anything for that guy. To put it in perspective, like I have immediate family members that have never met my kids in 9 years. They've never seen them.
Yeah.
Brothers, sisters that have never met my kids. And Randy's been to every one of their birthdays.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's awesome.
But, again, I mean, you talk about, private lessons, man. I mean, to get just a funny story about that. I remember we were at this one place called the Lonsdale Boxing Gym. It was, kind of an MMA boxing gym in Sophia. And, I had gone in there quite a bit and trained. And, guys knew who I was, and I had a pretty good, reputation. And they had kind of a viewing balcony above the main ring. And we're in the ring. And I mean, Randy's just, immediate takedown, grinding me to death. And I look up at this balcony, I see a little bit of light. There's like 6 people up there with their cell phones, like recording this whole thing. I'm like, oh,
you're like, oh man. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like, again, when you train with someone at that level, I mean, we're talking, this was 2007 or 8. I don't, but over 10 years ago. So I mean, he's still, he's 60 now and he's still a beast. But think about, he's in his late 40s. I mean, he was still, just retired from UFC.
Sure.
I mean, there are levels to this game, is not a cliche.
Yeah.
I mean, just the strength, the balance, the technique, there's, we've all rolled with these guys. They're like, man, he seems like he's a step ahead. I mean, this guy isn't a step ahead. Like, he is staircases
miles ahead. Yeah,
of what you're even thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so
he's
it's
on another planet. Yeah.
Awesome experience for me. And I mean, he's great. Like, he taught my kids like a crossbody leg row, I think, in my basement in Minnesota,
That's awesome.
Just super cool. And they know he's famous, but they don't understand the magnitude of
right. How big he
popularity. Yeah. But great experience. So hopefully, I think Ryan, his son, kind of runs and owns the gym there. Also, just a great guy. He fought in the UFC, fought in Bellator. So I'm sure you'll get a chance to meet him when you're there.
Yeah.
Really good jiu-jitsu too. So,
no, that's fantastic. Yeah. So we're kind of running out of timer. I can't believe we did an hour 45 already. That was fast. But we talked about a ton of stuff, and we could probably talk, like a half day on all this stuff. And we just kind of hit tip of the iceberg. So, but yeah, usually what I do, I kind of, chop it all up into some small clips, which I'll send to you and invite you on them so you can use them on your platform. And
cool.
And I appreciate you talking to me today. And I saw your podcast on Jiu-Jitsu Dummies. I thought that was great. And I'll keep promoting for you on my page too. I got no problem doing that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I always appreciate that. Always love supporting other people in the industry. And I think, eventually when you do retire, I think you can have a fantastic, kind of side career or second career in, the jiu-jitsu world. And you got, tons of opportunities and possibilities. I think, like you said,
thanks, man.
We'll see where it takes you. And I'm sure you're going to do fantastic. So.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed the conversation, John.